Hello everyone, welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah shir. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. Excuse me, and we are continuing to learn Hilchas Chanukah. We will be learning in this shir Mirza Hashem Daf Kuf Mem Beis Amid Aleph. We pick up on the bottom of Kuf Mem Aleph Amid Beis, Siman Tafresh Ayin Gimel Sif Aleph. Bottom line, the words of the Ramah. In the beginning of Sif Aleph, the Mechaber taught us that Kol Hashmanim V'Hapsilois Ksherim L'Ner Chanukah, we're allowed to use all types of fuel and all types of wicks for Neres Chanukah. We explained that even though that's not the case when it comes to Neres Shabbos, on Shabbos we cannot use all wicks and all fuels. That's because we can't use a wick or a fuel that will not make a clean flame. If it's going to make a sputtering flame, we can't use it on Shabbos, because on Shabbos there's a chashash shemayate. We have to be concerned that if it's not burning well, you might go ahead and tweak the wick and be over on the malacha of HaTorah. However, on Chanukah there is no such concern. There is no Isser malacha. Even when Chanukah falls out on Shabbos, we know that on Chanukah you're not allowed to be mishtamish to the or of the Menorah. You're not allowed to make use, you're not allowed to benefit from the light of the Menorah, and therefore even on Shabbos we learned that the Chanukah licht you could use any type of shemen and any type of psil, because again there's no chashash of shemayate. Since you can't go learn or read by the light of the Menorah, we're not concerned shemayate, and we're going to learn more about this today. First comes along the Ramah here on the bottom line of Kuf Mem Aleph Amid Beis, and the Ramah says, Haga, Umiyu, nevertheless, even though you could use all types of shemen, all types of psilois, shemen zayis mitzvah min hamuvchar, there is a mitzvah min hamuvchar to use shemen zayis. And he brings this down from the Mordechai, the Kolbai, and the Maharil. Now, why is there a mitzvah min hamuvchar to use shemen zayis? So the truth is that if you look at the Mordechai, where the Ramah brings this down from, the Ramah himself the Mordechai himself does not give a reason. The Mordechai doesn't say why there's a mitzvah min hamuvchar to use shemen zayis. The Mordechai just brings down that they used shemen zayis. Rashi, we do find brought down, I'm trying to remember, it just escaped me. Oh, we have this, you see, the Gemara in Shabbos, on Chaf Aleph Amid Beis, the Gemara in Shabbos on Chaf Aleph Amid Beis says to use shemen zayis, and the Gemara says because it's tzolil tfei. On Chaf Gimel Amid Aleph, the Gemara says umiyu shemen zayis mitzvah min hamuvchar. The Gemara, the Ramah says here, shemen zayis mitzvah min hamuvchar. I'm sorry, I'm confusing myself here. The Gemara in Chaf Gimel Amid Aleph says that you should use shemen zayis, and the Gemara says it's tzolil. It burns very clearly. And Rashi over there says it's tzol dahare tvei. It makes a nice clear flame. So it's very apparent from Rashi, the reason why there's a mitzvah min hamuvchar to use shemen zayis is because it makes a beautiful flame, not for any other reason. The Meiri says that there's a mitzvah min hamuvchar to use shemen, as opposed to shava, as opposed to, let's say, wax candles. The Meiri says there's a mitzvah min hamuvchar to use shemen. Why is there a mitzvah min hamuvchar to use shemen? Because shahad neis haya b'shemen. We know that the nes occurred with shemen, and since the nes occurred with shemen, it's a mitzvah min hamuvchar to use shemen. But the Meiri does not say that there's a mitzvah min hamuvchar to use shemen zayis, because the nes occurred with shemen zayis. He says shemen. So I did not find right away a source that says that the nes occurred with shemen zayis, therefore you should use shemen zayis. I have the Meiri that says that the nes occurred with shemen, so you should use shemen. We have Rashi that says that you should use shemen zayis because shemen zayis is tzolil, because it makes a very beautiful flame. So that's all I could tell you why the Ramah says over here that there's a mitzvah min hamuvchar to use shemen zayis. Continues the Ramah. V'mein shemen zayis matzui. If you don't have shemen zayis available, mitzvah bishmonim, you still should use oil. Sha'oiron zach v'naki, you should use a type of oil that has a nice, clear, beautiful flame. Continues the Ramah says, however, the Ramah says that in his regions, they were accustomed lahadlik b'ner shel shava, to actually use wax, ki oiron salol kamay shemen, because it made a nice, beautiful flame similar to that of oil. Okay, let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah ois katan dalit shava. The Ramah says that they used wax candles. When we come on, notwithstanding what the Ramah says, mitzvah b'shal sheben tfei b'ner shel shava. There is a greater mitzvah to use oil than wax. Dal yedei shemen nasa hanes, because the nes occurred through oil, and that's what I told you. The Meiri says that. He doesn't bring it down here from the Meiri, but if you do look in the Sharatzia and Ois Katan Dalid, he brings down a very interesting, he brings this down from the Chuvas Mahari Bruna Siman Lamites. He doesn't bring it down from the Meiri, but he brings down an interesting Maharal. V'hinei das Maharal mi Prague b'sifroi ner mitzvah, says that the Maharal mi Prague writes, Shaloi lahadlik klal b'ner shava v'chelev, that you should not light with wax or some other kind of solidified fat. Eladafka b'shemen, you should specifically use oil, mipnei sha'anes nasa b'shemen, because the nes occurred through oil. Aval ein noihagid kavasei, but the Machzah Shekel says that we are not noig like the Maharal mi Prague. So the Maharal mi Prague takes a very strong position not to use wax and only to use oil. So again, what comes out over here is we have the Mechaber who says you could use any type of shemen, any type of wicks. We have the Ramah that says that the mitzvah ben amuvchar is shemen zayis. What I have found so far is we have a Gemara and a Rashi that says that there's a mitzvah in shemen zayis because it's solil, because it burns very clearly and very beautifully. We have a Meiri, and brought here in the Sharet Zion, we have a Chuvas Mahari Baruna that says that you should use shemen because the nes occurred through shemen. Okay, let's go weiter. Now we go back to the Shulchan Aruch, second line, near the end of the line, says the Mechaber, Va'afilu b'leil Shabbos, even when Chanukah falls out, even on Shabbos Chanukah, there's always a Shabbos Chanukah, Va'afilu b'leil Shabbos, even when you're lighting Chanukah licht Friday night, so Va'afilu b'leil Shabbos shebesoich yemei Chanukah, even on the Shabbos of Chanukah, mutter lahadlik b'neres Chanukah, hashmanim v'hapsilois, she'asur lahadlik b'hem ner Shabbos. Even on Shabbos Chanukah, I said this at the outset of this year, you're allowed to light the Chanukah licht using types of oils or types of wicks that would be usher to use for Chanukah licht. And the Mechaber explains why. So I'm going to skip the words of the Ramah for the moment. The Mechaber said, even on Shabbos Chanukah, you could use for your Chanukah licht wicks and fuels that you normally cannot use for Neris of Shabbos. Why? Says the Mechaber, Lefisha also lehishtamish b'ner Chanukah, because you're not allowed to benefit, you're not allowed to use the Neris Chanukah, bein b'Shabbos, bein b'chol, both on Shabbos and during the week. And since you're not allowed to benefit from the Neris of Chanukah, you could use, even on Shabbos Chanukah, wicks and fuels that you normally can't use on Shabbos, because we're not afraid Shema Yateh. We're not afraid you're going to tweak the flame and be over in a Havara, because why would you tweak the flame? You can't use the flame anyway. So it's not going to concern you if it doesn't have a nice big flame. If you could use it, so then you might want to read something, let's say, La'araner, and if it's not burning clearly, you'll go tweak the wick. But Neris Chanukah, you're not allowed to use. So if you're not allowed to use them, there is no Shash of Shema Yateh, and therefore you can use any type of fuel and any type of wick, not only on weeknights of Chanukah, but even on Friday night of Chanukah. Before we do the words of the Ramah, let's go to the Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Hey, where the Mishnah Berurah explains this. The Mishnah Berurah says, Va'afilu b'leil Shabbos shebesoich Chanukah, even Friday night of Chanukah, you could use inferior wicks and inferior fuels. Ritzarnoi loymar, what the Mechaber wants to tell you is, the Chiddush that the Mechaber is telling you is, Tesal kedaitach, you might have thought The nechesh bazeh k'may ba'alma b'ner shel Shabbos. Shema loy tadlik yafeh. We might have thought that when it comes to Neres Chanukah, you have to have the same concern that you have for Neres Shabbos all year round. What's that concern? Shema loy tidlik yafeh. Maybe it won't burn nicely. V'yata haner, and you'll tweak the ner lahavi Hashem and lafi apsila to help the oil, the fuel, travel up the wick to get a nice flame. Kamash Malon, the Mechaber is teaching us the kan ein lachash lazeh, that on Shabbos Chanukah, when it comes to the Chanukah licht, you don't have to worry about this. The ha'asr lehishtamish la'ira, because you're not allowed to benefit from the Chanukah licht. You're not allowed to use it, and therefore you're not going to have a problem. In Cain, le'ichmas la b'mesh le'tid like yafeh. So you're not going to be concerned with the fact that it's not burning nicely, and you're not going to come to Shema Yate. Okay, now let's skip Ois Katan Vav for the moment, because that's going on the Ramah that we skipped. Let's go straight to Ois Katan Zayin. Says the Mishnah Berurah, again, there's no concern Friday night, Levisha Asar Lehishtamesh, because you're not allowed to make use of the Neres Chanukah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Hainu Afilo Oisan Shemaisifin Hamahadrin B'chalayla. You should realize that the Isser of being mishtamish to the Ar of the Menorah is not only on the new Chanukah licht that you're burning for that night. So if it's the 6th night of Chanukah, the Isser to gain benefit from the licht doesn't only apply to the new licht for tonight, number 6. You might think, really the Iker Mitzvah is only Ner Ishu Beisai. So once I light the new one, that's the real Chanukah licht for tonight. The other 5 are only Hiddur Mitzvah, Mahadrim and Mahadrim. Maybe I'm allowed to be mishtamish to the other 5. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no, Gam Kein Asur Lehistamish La'oran. You're not allowed to use those either. So the Isser of benefiting doesn't only apply to the new one, it applies to the old ones as well. Ois Katan Ches, B'ner Chanukah. Now here's where it gets interesting. B'ner Chanukah. You're not allowed to be mishtamish to the Ner Chanukah. The words of the Mechaber, Lefisha Asar Lehishtamish B'ner Chanukah. You're not allowed to make use of the Ner Chanukah, Bein B'Shabbos, Bein B'Chol, whether it's Shabbos, whether it's during the week. You're not allowed to make use of the Neres Chanukah. Why are you not allowed to make use of the Neres Chanukah? Says the Mishnah Berurah over here in Ois Katan Ches, B'ner Chanukah. Why? Kedei sheyehe nicker shehu ner mitzvah lefarsem hanes. And if you take a look at Charitzia and Ois Katan Vav, the Chavetz Chaim brings this down from Rashi on Chaf Aleph Amud Beis in Shabbos. You're not allowed to make use of the Neres Chanukah. Why? Says Rashi, all the way at the top of the Amud. Rashi says the reason you're not allowed to make use of the Neres Chanukah is because what's the whole point of Neres Chanukah? Presume Nisa. It's through the Neres Chanukah that we publicize the Nes of Chanukah. Now, we've seen over and over again, if somebody is going to think that those Neres that you're lighting, what are they for? They're because you need light. Let's go back in time where we didn't have electric lighting. So it was very common for people to have Neros at night burning in their house. Now, if the ner that you lit for Chanukah might just be the lamp that you're using to light your room, then there's no Presume Nisa. So the concern, according to Rashi, the reason why there's an Isser that you can't be mishtamish to the Ur of the Menorah is because if somebody is going to see you reading a book by the light of the Menorah, if somebody is going to see you doing your work by the light of the Menorah, then there's no Presume Nisa. Then it's not pshat that somebody looks at it and they see, oh, you're lighting extra Neres because of the Nes of Chanukah. No, you're lighting Neres because you use light. So in order to make sure that there should be a Presume Nisa from the Menorah, the Chazal said, Asar Lehishtamish La'ira. You're not allowed to use the light of the Menorah. This guy has Neres burning in his house and he's not using them, so what are they for? Oh, they're for the Nes of Chanukah, they're for Presume Nisa. So that's what Rashi says. So here we have the first rationale that we're going to see today for why there's an Isser Lehishtamish La'ira. Why are you not allowed to use the Neres of Chanukah? Because we want it to be nicker, we want it to be recognizable and obvious that these Neros are Neros Shel Mitzvah, and they're there for Presume Nisa. Now continues the Mishnah Berurah here in Ois Katan Ches, and he says, Va'oid. And there's another reason. And this he brings down from the Ran. V'oid, we have another reason. Kevan shal yedei nes shenase b'menorah tiknuha. Why do we light the menorah? Because of a nes that occurred on the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. And we have already seen previously that there are certain halachas that we're learning out from the neros of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. So here again, the Ran says, you know why does it isser to be mishtamish la'oira? Kevan shal yedei shenase b'menorah tiknuah. Since the whole takana of Neres Chanukah is because of the nes that occurred with the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, asa'uha kimenorah, the Chazal made the Neres of Chanukah like the Neres of the menorah, she'ein mishtamishin ba klal, where you didn't benefit from the Neres of the menorah. The Neres of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash were not there to be benefited from. Let's remember, where was the menorah? The menorah was in the Heichel. Who went into the Heichel? First of all, you were only allowed to go into the Heichel if you were going into the Heichel to perform the Avodah. You weren't allowed to just go into the Heichel. Oh, let me see what's going on in the Beis Hamikdash today. I want to go in there. I want to take a look at the Mizbeach. I want a nice quiet place. I'm a Kohen. I want a nice quiet place to learn the daf. There's too much noise going on outside with the menorah and everything else. I'll go into the Heichel. You're not allowed to go into the Heichel. You're only allowed to go into the Heichel at Tzarech HaAvodah. Could even be that a Kohen that goes into the Heichel, Shaloi l'Tzarech HaAvodah, is Chayiv Misa. So you're not allowed to go into the Heichel for anything. So the menorah in the Heichel was not there for light. So since the menorah in the Heichel, we didn't use the light, so too the Chanukah licht, we don't use the light. Now, the truth is that this is there's a lot of raid written on this. There's a kasha, a very difficult kasha to answer, which is that there's a Medrash Tanchuma that brings down that when they lit the menorah in the Heichel, all of the Chatzeris in Yerushalayim were full of light. So if all of the Chatzeris in Yerushalayim were full of light from the light of the menorah, it sounds like everybody was using the light of the menorah. Now, there are different answers to that question. One answer could be that, again, the menorah was not lit to light the Chatzeros in Yerushalayim, and it's very difficult to understand how the Neres in the Heichel could possibly have lit up the Chatzeros in Yerushalayim if the menorah was inside the Heichel, especially if the doors to the Heichel were closed. How is the light getting out to all the Chatzeros in Yerushalayim? Elamai, you have to say that the fact that the Medrash says that when they lit the menorah, the Chatzeros in Yerushalayim were all lit up, obviously that's some kind of nes. In that case, that's miraculous light. That's not really the light from the menorah. And therefore, when the Medrash says that they used the light, it doesn't really mean the light of the menorah. Another interesting question is, can you be mishtamish from the light of the Neres Chanukah when you're not in sight of the Neres Chanukah? Again, this maybe also plays into the question of what the problem of being mishtamish by the Neres of the menorah are. If the menorah is casting light, but I'm in a different room and I can't even see the menorah, but some light is escaping into the room, is that really called that I'm being mishtamish by the light of the menorah? It's definitely not a problem that there's a lack of hecker that the neros are not neros mitzvah, because it's not like I'm standing there using it that someone's going to think that that's my standard lamp. It's obvious that it's neros mitzvah. If we're going to see there's another issue of bizui mitzvah. There's no bizui mitzvah if I'm in a different room and I'm doing something by the light that's being cast from the menorah a room away. There's no inyan of bizui mitzvah. And it could be that even this question of using the light of the menorah was not made for use. There's no shaila of me'ilah on using the light of the menorah. You don't have to be a carbon me'ilah if you counted money by the light of the menorah in the Heichel. So it is interesting, but this is what the Ran says. The Ran says that somehow they meant a milah in the Neres Chanukah. They compared it to the Neres of the Beis Hamikdash, which the bottom line is, even if it's not usher to use the light, but Itzichel was not made for light. So you don't use the Chanukah licht for light. So far we have two reasons over here. Okay, and Ois Katan Tes, the Mechaber said you're not allowed to use the light of the menorah bein b'Shabbos, bein b'chayil, whether it's Shabbos or it's during the week. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Tes. What's the chiddush that you're not allowed to use the light of the menorah even on Shabbos? Why is that a chiddush? So the Mishnah Berurah says there is a chiddush. Hainu da'afilu lechal etzlan. Maybe you want to eat your Shabbos Suda by the light of the Neres Chanukah. Now, you might have a Havamina that that's okay because the Suda Shabbos is a Suda Shal Mitzvah. Maybe I'm allowed to use the Chanukah licht for Suda Shal Mitzvah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. Hainu da'afilu lechal etzlan dehu Sudas Mitzvah gam kein oser. Okay, so we did the Mishnah Berurah on the Mechaber that we saw so far. Now let's go back to the Ramah. So again, what did the Mechaber say? The Mechaber gave us a halacha. He said that even on Shabbos Chanukah, you could use inferior wicks and inferior fuels. Why? Because you're not allowed to be mishtamish la'ora. You're not allowed to use the light of the menorah, and therefore there is no chash of shema yateh. Now the Ramah comes up with an interesting little caveat. Says the Ramah, Haga, im eino noisin baner rak kidei shir mitzvasai. This is only true if you put in an amount of oil that's going to burn for a half an hour and no more. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what's the explanation of this? Take a look at Mishnah Berurah's Katan Vav. If you put enough oil in your menorah that your menorah is going to burn for 4 hours, so it's going to burn a lot longer than the share of a half an hour, then yesh chash shema yata oisei ner Chanukah lehishtamish by. Now, on Shabbos, you do have a concern of Shema Yateh. Why? Because the only reason we don't have a concern of Shema Yateh is because you're not allowed to benefit from the Neres of Chanukah. But we learned previously that even on a regular night of Chanukah, you're only not allowed to be mishtamish to the Ur of the Menorah for the half an hour of the mitzvah. But remember what we said. We said there's a half an hour that the Neres burn, that's the mitzvah. If your Neres burned for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, that might be Hiddur mitzvah. But it's zichah not the Iker mitzvah of Chanukah. So once the half hour is over, you're allowed to benefit from the light of the menorah, because that's no longer called Ner mitzvah. So in that case, on Friday night, for the half hour that the menorah is burning for the mitzvah, you could use inferior wicks and inferior oils, because also lehishtamish la'ora, you're not allowed to benefit from the light of the menorah, so there's no chash of shema yateh. But once the half hour is over, if your menorah is going to burn for 4 hours, then there is no isser to be mishtamish la'ora, and then there is a concern of shema yateh. So therefore, says the Ramah, while it's true what the Mechaber says, that technically on Friday night there's no chash of shema yateh with the nearest of the menorah, because also lehishtamish la'ora, that's only true if you put in an amount of oil that's only going to burn for the Iker mitzvah, for the half hour. But if you put in more oil and it's going to burn even later, then there is a chash of shema yateh, and then you're not allowed to use inferior wicks and inferior oils on Friday night. So for us, dare I say, I think most of our menorahs burn longer than the shear. Even on Friday night, you would not be allowed to use inferior wicks and inferior oils. You would be restricted to using the types of oils and the types of wicks that you're allowed to use on Friday night, because there is a concern of shema yateh. Let's just finish this Mishnah Berurah here. It's cut vav. Yesh chash shema yateh oisei ner Chanukah lehishtamish by akar ashir shel hadlaka she'az mutar lehanis bimenu kedei la'el b'sibit tafreish ayin beis sif beis. Now, something that was concerning me a little bit is this notion that the Mechaber and the Mishnah Berurah is explaining, and everybody accepts this notion, that there is no chash of shema yateh when you can't be mishtamish la'ora. That's a given. The Ramah agrees to that. Everybody agrees to that. During the half hour of the mitzvah, on Friday night, there is no chash of shema yateh. Why not? Because you're not allowed to be mishtamish la'ora. And if you're not allowed to be mishtamish la'ora, why would you be matah the ner? And the Mishnah Berurah has spoken out very, very strongly. The Mishnah Berurah said in Ois Katan Zayin No, in Ois Cotton Hay, on the first wide line in the Mishnah Berurah, the Mishnah Berurah said, "In Kain lo ichbas la." We don't care. B'masha lo like yofa. Why would we be mata the nair? We can't use the nair. Since we can't use the nair, if it's not burning with a nice flame, we're not going to care. So there's Dakshash Shabiyate. Why would I tweak the nair? What do I care? What's bothering me about that a little bit is that I see all the time when it comes to Neres Chanukah that people look at their menorah, and if they see that it's not burning nicely, they go to be mata the nair. Let's say, I think I see it very often with floating wicks that people use, even with other kind of wicks. After they burn for like an hour or two, you start to get those carbonized pieces of wick, and suddenly it's not burning so nicely. So people take a toothpick or they take something and they knock off those pieces of carbonized material at the tip of the wick, and now it starts burning nicely again. And the reason they do it, I think, is because of Hiddur Mitzvah. They want their Chanukah licht to burn beautifully. So what do you mean, lo ichbas lo? I see b'chush that people do care, and yet it's apparent that that's not a factor. So I think it seems to me that what you have to say is that the whole chashash of Shemayate, is that somebody is going to be using the light of the menorah and he's going to be distracted. So, for instance, let's say you were allowed to learn by the light of the menorah. So you take out a Mishnah Berurah and you're using the light of the menorah and you're trying to chazer the Mishnah Berurah and your mind is in the Mishnah Berurah and it's dark, I can't see. I'll go tweak the nair. So it's something that you're doing out of distraction because you're involved in something else. But the idea that you should look at the nair, see that the nair is not burning nicely, and intentionally do something to make the nair burn nicer, that means that you're going straight out to do the malacha of Havara. No one is going to just go straight out and do the malacha of Havara on Shabbos. He knows that Havara is also on Shabbos. He's not distracted. See, when somebody's being mishtamish la'ira, he's not really thinking about the nair. He's thinking about the Mishnah Berurah. And then he sees that it's dark. So he goes like that to the nair, to go ahead and try to make it lighter. So he was over on Havara. But over here, the person is not it is the nair that he's looking at. And we're not afraid that he's going to go ahead and be mata the nair. That's what occurred to me. Okay. Now let's go weiter. In the Mechaber, 2 lines from the bottom, right by the Ois Cotton Yud for the Mishnah Berurah, says the Mechaber, Va'afilu livdoik ma'ois. So what did we see so far? We saw that you're not allowed to be mishtamish to the or of the menorah. And so far we saw 2 reasons why not. One reason is because we need a hecker that those neres are neres shel mitzvah. And if you're going to be using the light of the menorah, we lose the hecker that is neres shel mitzvah. Maybe it's just your standard issue lamp. I mean, we see you doing work by it. That was one reason. Another reason is because Chazal, the Ran said, Asa'ur ki menorah b'migdash. They gave it the same status as the menorah in the Migdash, which we did not use for light. Now, says the Mechaber like this, Va'afilu livdoik mois, even to count money, even to check money, not to count money, to check money. In the old days, you had to check currency. You had to check coins to see if they're still good, if they're still quality. If it's not a good coin, you gave it back. You didn't accept it from somebody who was trying to pay you. So even to check the quality of the currency or of the coinage, oilim noisan, or to count money, la'ira, by the light of the menorah, is aser. So the Mechaber gives us another 2 types of activity that are also by the light of the menorah. Now we have to understand, why does the Mechaber have to tell us this? The Mechaber already told us that to be mishtamish la'ira is aser. Why is he telling me afilu, even this type of shimush is aser? So let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says, Ois Cotton Yud, va'afilu livdaik shehu tashbish arai. These are very arai-dika types of usage of the light. This is not something that's a usage of derech kva. This is not you're sitting down and doing work by the light of the menorah. You're sitting and reading by the light of the menorah. This is just a quick, I have to check, is this a good dollar bill? Yeah, it's a good dollar bill. And then you walk away. So, says the Mishnah Berurah, you might think that that would be okay. So the Mechaber is telling you, no. Even that's not okay. Now let's analyze that in light of the reasoning that we have so far, why you're not allowed to use the light of the menorah. If the reason why you're not allowed to use the light of the menorah is because we need a hecker, that it's a ner mitzvah, so I might have thought that if it's something that's arai, you go over to the menorah for 20 seconds to look at a dollar bill or to look at a coin, or you go over to the menorah for 30 seconds to count 5 $20 bills and see that you have $100 over there. That doesn't make it, that still retains a hecker that it's ner shel mitzvah. The fact that you used the ner for 30 seconds, does that really, people are going to think, it's not the ner shel mitzvah? So maybe we need this chiddush. Okay, and if it's asa'ua kimigdash, maybe also. So maybe again, we still need that chiddush. Maybe asa'ua kimigdash. Okay, so what? You're really you're only making use of the ner derech arai. Is that really a problem? So kamash balon, that even this type of arai type of usage is a problem. Even to count the money far away, where you're not right next to the ner, gamken aser is also aser. Ice cutting yod aleph aser. And now, suddenly, we have a third reason why there's an isser of using the light of the menorah. Aser, kedei shaloi yihiyu mitzvahs bezuyos alav. Now, suddenly, we have a new reason why you're not allowed to use the neiros, and that is because we don't want the mitzvah to be bazui. If you're going to use the Chanukah neiros for these type of usages, that's a bizui of the mitzvah. That's a bizayin of the mitzvah. But the Chavetz Chaim says it's only these type of usages that are at least a tashmish arai, a temporary usage that's aser. But if you're not really using it at all, in other words, don't think you're not allowed to sit in the room that has the menorah because there's light in the room. And if you're sitting in the room, you're somehow you're enjoying the light. That's not a problem. You have to be using the light, at least derech harai. So again, I just want to point out that so far now, we have 3 reasons why you can't use the light of the menorah. We have the reason that there has to be a hecker that it's a ner mitzvah. We have a reason that asa'ua kimigdash. And now we have another reason that there's a chashash of bizui mitzvah. That by going and doing something by the light of menorah, somehow it's a bizui mitzvah. Okay. Continues the Mechaber. The Mechaber says at the bottom line, you should know, afilu tashmish shel kedusha. Even a tashmish shel kedusha. Kigayin lilmoid la'ora, like going ahead and using it to learn Torah, aser. Even that's aser. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting your days. Afilu tashmish shel. Well, let's go weiter in the Mechaber first. So again, the Mechaber says afilu tashmish shel kedusha kigayin lilmoid la'ora. Even a tashmish shel kedusha, like learning Torah by the light of the menorah, is aser. However, the Mechaber says v'yesh mi shematir betashmish shel kedusha. But there are those that are matir when it comes to a tashmish shel kedusha. Now, before we even go to the Mishnah Berurah, if you look at the dalid of the Be'er HaGoyla over here, it says afilu tashmish shel kedusha is aser. You're not even allowed to learn by the light of the menorah. He brings that down. He says tur b'shem aviv harash, the tur in the name of the rush. Now, it's a little bit interesting to me that the Be'er HaGoyla says that the Tur quotes this from the Rush. It's not so much that the Tur quotes it from the Rush. The Tur says that it's aser. You're not allowed to do even a tashmish shel kedusha by the light of the menorah. Then he brings down the Baal HaIter, who says the yesh matirin. There are those that are matir. And then he says v'loy nehira la'adoni avi arash. My father, my master, the Rosh, did not agree with the Bala Itter. That's the way the Torah brings it. But in the Baragoyla Ois Katan Dalid, he brings down from the Ran, the Kos of a Ran, and I looked up this Ran inside. The Ran says, "Tekevan sha'al yidei neisha nasa b'menorah tiknu asa'u k'menorah she'emishtam sheba klal." This is the source for what we saw, that one of the reasons you can't be mishtamish la'ora is because asa'ua kemigdash. The Ran says it to explain why even a tashbih shel kedusha is aser. The Ran says even a tashbih shel kedusha is aser. Why? Because they made it like the Menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. The Menorah in the Beis Hamikdash was not made for light, and therefore it doesn't matter what kind of usage you use. Even a tashbih shel kedusha you're not allowed to use. Now the Mishnah Berurah over here, nice cutting Yud Beis, says like this. He says, "Medivrei ataz muchach," from the Taz it comes out, "De l'dea rishona," that according to this first opinion, according to this Ran, according to the Torah, who asers even a tashbih shel kedusha, aser afilu belimud derech arai, even derech arai, even just to look up a quick Rambam, even just to look up a quick Rashi, is aser to the light of the menorah. Why? Because aser ur kemigdash. Because the bottom line is, it doesn't matter why you're using it. The light of the Menorah in the Beis Hamikdash was not there for light, and therefore the Chanukah Menorah is not for light. And it doesn't matter what you're using it for. Even to look up something in a Rashi, Derech Harai, even though it's a Tashbih Shel Kedusha, is still Asr. The Ilu B'derech Kva, because if we're talking about mamish sitting down and learning by the light of the Menorah, Afilu L'Deya Shnia Asr. The Taz says that the Yesh Mi Shematir, that's brought down by the Torah in the name of the Bala Itter, that says that you could do a Tashbih Shel Kedusha, is only B'derech Harai. You can't, even the Yesh Mi Shematir, even the Bala Itter would be maskim that you can't just sit down and learn for a half an hour by the light of the Menorah. That even the Bala Itter would aser. So the first opinion, that asers completely asers even derech harai. The yesh b'shematir is matir derech harai. And he says the Ryan b'bir halacha. The bir halacha has a long discussion about this. Ois katan yud gimel aser v'chein b'neres beis haknesses. You should know that this iser to be mishtamish la'ora applies in the menorah of the shul as well. Ein mishtamish la'ora naf tashbih kedusha k'ma b'bayis tahainu yirtzel hispal marav etzlam kalzman shlo yidolku chasisha aser. So here we have this machlokes, could you be mishtamish to the ar of the menorah for a tashbih kedusha? We have the first opinion that says it's aser even b'derech harai. We have the yesh b'shematir that says that b'derech harai it's okay. Now, why is it okay to do it b'derech harai according to the yesh b'shematir? So the Beis Yosef says, and he brings it down from the Shibbolei Leket, because there's no bizui mitzvah involved in using the light of the menorah for tashbih shel kedusha. Adarabah, the Shibbolei, like it says, that's derech kavod. That's a kavod. Now, again, we've seen all these different reasons why you can't be mishtamish to the ar of the menorah, and the Ran who says that you can't even do a tashbih shel kedusha even derech harai is not because of bizui mitzvah. It's because asa'ua kemigdash. Yet the Bala Itter says derech harai, there's no bizui mitzvah. So I think what we're seeing is that there's kind of a balancing act between all of these different rationales. These are all different valid reasons why you can't be mishtamish to the ar of the menorah. And some of these reasonings apply more to certain types of usage and less to other types of usage. So for example, when it comes to counting money to the light of the menorah, so on the one hand, you might say to yourself, look, if the reason you can't be mishtamish la'ora is because we need a hecker that the ner is a ner shel mitzvah, the fact that I count a few bills by the light of the menorah and it takes me 5 seconds, that doesn't take away the hecker that the ner is a ner shel mitzvah. So maybe according to that reason, that shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, but there's another reason, and that is bizui mitzvah. To count money by the light of a ner shel mitzvah is a bizui mitzvah, so we don't do it. How about learning by the light of the menorah? Well, learning, it's a tashbih shel kedusha. Maybe we'll waive the issue of heker. Maybe we'll say, even though now we don't have such a hecker that it's a ner shel mitzvah, yeah, but it's tashmish kedusha. I mean, it's learning Torah. Yeah, but there's another reason. Asa'ur kemikdash. It's like the nearest to the base of English. It's not there for light. Yeah, but how about if you're only learning Derech Harai? If you're only learning Derech Harai, you're looking up a quick Rashi, then the Baal Iter says it's okay. Why is it okay? Well, there's no Bizoi mitzvah, and it's Derech Harai, so it means you're just looking up something quickly. Maybe it doesn't take away the hecker so much, and there's no Bizoyin, and Asur Kemikdash, like I said, there's no Me'ila. It's not that there's an Isser Hana. So it's kind of like, I think, a balancing act between all of these different rationales and how different Paiskim applied it. Okay? We're going to stop over here. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Discuss of limud HaTorah should be Megan. I got Klal Yisrael. The Rabban Hashem should send Yeshua's, Refuah's, Parnasa, and Shidduchim to all those in need. And we should be zeichet to see the Bias Gal Tzedek. B'meherah v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.